What is the best way, the most satisfying way, but also the most democratic way of dealing with a particularly nasty online troll? An answer today from Harry Potter creator J.K. Rowling. She's long been the bête noire of trans activists, some of whom took exception to a post which was widely shared last year. Perhaps you remember it. It was in June that she tweeted about a headline that referred to, quote, people who menstruate with these words. She said, "I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Womban, wimpund, womad." To people who don't follow every twist and turn of intersectionality, that might sound fairly innocuous, but the proverbial hit the fan. That tweet and others she posted explaining why she believed biological sex was a fact provoked a huge backlash online. Thousands of people accused her of transphobia, but undeterred, she went on to write an essay about the importance of women's loos, for instance, as safe spaces for women. Most of the abuse seems to wash over the best-selling author, but occasionally she's roused to a response. Yesterday, she drew attention to a death threat as an example of the sort of hate mail she gets pretty routinely online. Rowling shared a message from a Twitter user who described themselves as a gender-fluid lesbian and cyber-Marxist called Sam. Sam wrote to Rowling, "I wish you a very nice pipe bomb in mailbox." Well, Rowling hit back, quote, "To be fair, when you can't get a woman sacked, arrested or dropped by her publisher and cancelling her only made her book sales go up, there's really only one place to go." Here is our GB News presenter, Free Speech Nation presenter, Andrew Doyle. Andrew, this is a cause celeb, isn't it? But you'd think if you stopped 100 people on the street, most would know about it, but I suspect only... Give me a number, 5 would?
Well, I mean, 80% of the country are not on Twitter. Those are the 80% that are sensible. And, of course, so they're not aware of the full extent of what's going on. And I think with the J.K. Rowling story, it's worth going back and just explaining what happened here, because a lot of people don't know, and because the mainstream media has been pretty lax about reporting what's actually going on here. So a couple of years ago, Rowling liked a tweet. That's a function on Twitter where you express approval for a tweet. She liked a tweet by a gender-critical feminist, and this resulted in lots of abuse coming her way from LGBT activists and the gay press. A gender-critical feminist, by the way, just to be clear, that would be someone who would believe that gender roles are socially constructed, so things like that boys play football and girls play with dolls, that those things have been conditioned into them rather than something innate, you know. So that's what a gender-critical feminist believes. Gender-critical feminists also recognise the importance of the biological reality of womanhood in terms of protecting women's safety, women's only spaces, domestic violence refuge centres, that kind of thing, because, of course, the majority of violent acts committed against women are by men. That's just a fact. So you need to acknowledge biological reality. Now, this is the debate that J.K. Rowling has waded into by first liking the gender-critical feminist's tweet, and then in December 2019, there was the case of Maya Forstater, a tax expert, who expressed her view. She'd actually criticised the government's proposed amendments to the Gender Recognition Act. As a result of that, she was fired. This was the one that said you could self-designate as a gender. Exactly. So that ended up in court because she was fired for her opinion, effectively. There were lots. Didn't have her contract renewed. OK, that's a good clarity. Yes, she was basically up for this tribunal. A lot of it was misrepresented. People had said that she was harassing trans people at work. She didn't work with any trans people, so there were a lot of lies circulating about this. In the end, that got overturned because at the time, the judge had said that her view that there's a difference between men and women wasn't allowable in a democratic society, this preposterous claim that was recently overturned by the High Court, thank goodness, because otherwise that would have set a legal precedent which could have been very dangerous for freedom of speech. Anyway, at the time, J.K. Rowling posted a tweet. I've actually written down the text so I don't get it wrong. J.K. Rowling said, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real," and then a hashtag, "I stand with Maya." Now, this was the key. This tweet caused just a maelstrom of abuse, threats, all kinds of things. As you can see from the tenor of the tweet, it wasn't controversial. It wasn't urging hate. What, Age of Aquarius, live and let live? It's very much live and let live. It wasn't transphobic. All the things that she's been painted as. In addition, as you mentioned in your introduction, J.K. Rowling has written a very extensive, compassionate and nuanced blog post, which anyone can read. If you want to know her views on this, it's all there. She's not anti-trans. She's very explicitly for trans rights, for equality. She talks about her background of having experienced domestic abuse and how this led her to think about the ways in which women's spaces are important. So in all of that, it's all there if people want to look at it. But the way that the press and activists have treated her is as though she's hateful and transphobic. And I often talk to people online, I mean, not the crazy ones who I just block, but the people who say, but isn't J.K. Rowling a transphobe? And I always say to them, can you quote anything she has said that is transphobic? And they never can. Now, in a situation like that, you would expect adults to revise their view and say, OK, well, since there's no evidence, then I'm wrong. But they don't. They double down. And that means that what we're dealing here is a kind of, well, I will say it's a kind of hysteria. If you want to get a sense of the extent of the abuse that J.K. Rowling has received for those comments that I've just read out, there's a post on a website called Medium called J.K. Rowling and the Trans Activist, a story in screenshots. I would urge extreme caution for anyone who wants to look. But it collects a lot of the abuse she's getting. A lot of it is sexualised violence, rape threats, death threats, all these sorts of things. Incredibly misogynistic in nature. And what is I've never seen this level of misogyny. What's very clear is there is a contingent within the extreme trans activist lobby who have a very serious problem with women.
But is it more than that, Andrew? Is it born of a kind of frustration that here is a group of people, a small cadre of activists who are so conditioned, so used to getting their way?
Maybe.
And here is somebody who, as you've described it before, is pretty much uncancelable. It's worth reflecting, I think, just how uncancelable she is. I mean, you know, on one level it's fantastic. Here's somebody with the profile she has who's made a mint through, you know, books of some literary merit, kids love them, etc.
Yeah.
But who said, OK, I'm going to use my platform to be brave about grappling with this most sensitive of topics.
Yes.
What happened with the publishers? Because when we think about publishers, we think of publishers as sometimes being quite keen to ditch people who don't quite fit in with the good form.
To be fair to her publisher, who's recently published the Robert Galbraith books, which is her pseudonym for the detective novels, and also her children's book, The Ichabog.
Easy for you to say.
Ichabog? Was it? Yeah, I think that was right. Her publisher did receive a lot of flack for this. This is Hachette. But they stood up and said, no, actually, we believe in freedom of speech. And to their credit, they weren't prepared to do that. And as Rowling has pointed out in that last tweet that has caused all the trouble, you know, she's making the point that she is uncancelable. She's fully aware of this. She's the most successful author. What is it? Over 500 million books sold or something. She's grossed 6 billion.
Yeah, that feels about right.
It's about right, isn't it? So she's, you know, she's extremely successful. And of course, you're right. There's a lot of activists who are very frustrated that they can't get her that way. And I think it's really important to emphasise that these people online who are doing this are not representative of trans people. The vast majority of trans people look at this stuff and think this is outrageous. And also, this does them no favours at all. I mean, the whole debate is being framed as the difference between people who are for trans rights and against trans rights. But J.K. Rowling is for trans rights. So this is not accurate.
Yeah, well, Andrew, I mean, you know, in a sense, so far, OK, we've seen this before, a small, tiny core speak for a bigger group that they don't represent. But actually, into this mix, we talked about this earlier, come organisations of some repute and standing in society with strong links with corporate entities and government, mermaids, who've tweeted what?
So Mermaids are the trans youth charity, and I don't know if you've got the text of the tweet there.
We can show it. I think we can bring it up.
I've got it on my phone, actually, if that's any help.
There you go. It's there, Andrew. Look.
OK, so they've said, this is their response to the death threat against J.K. Rowling. OK, so sad to yet again see a children's author casting trans people as a threat to women. It is a despicable manipulation of public opinion to hurt a minority group. Now, here's the thing about what's happened there. J.K. Rowling has said, these are the kind of threats that I'm getting, and has shown an example, right? At no point has she said, this is what trans people behave like, this is what trans people are like. No, not at all, because she doesn't think it, and therefore she hasn't said it. For Mermaids, a mainstream charity like this, to go out there and use the threat against Rowling and her reaction to it as evidence of transphobia, I think it's absolutely outrageous. And the problem is that it isn't just a few angry activists online. Like you say, this has seeped into the discourse. There was a journalist for The Independent who claimed that Rowling had been radicalised online. That was the phrase that he used. In all of this, we are getting commentators again and again buying in to the hysteria, being part of the problem, actually. So, you know, it's all very well just to dismiss the horrible threats and the misogyny online. And I'm not suggesting that mainstream journalists are engaging in that kind of thing, and they would condemn it as well, of course. But, you know, like websites like the Pink News, which is fairly mainstream gay press, they're obsessed with Rowling. They've done dozens and dozens of articles smearing her as a transphobe. And let's call it what it is. It's libel. The MSN the other day put out...
well, if it's libel, she's got the moolah to test it in the courts, hasn't
well,
she?
maybe that will happen ultimately. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I was about to say MSN put an article out the other day, just 2 days ago, smearing her as a transphobe. And again, if you're going to make accusations of that severity, you'd better have some evidence, particularly when there's someone as rich as Rowling, who would be well within her rights to take legal action, as far as I can see. And maybe that is what it will take. I mean, you know, the way in which people behave online, and they throw around phrases like transphobe and racist and fascist, and, you know, she's even been called a white supremacist, which is absolute nonsense. You know, these things matter. The truth matters. And if you're going to throw away insults like that online, try and defame someone.
Just as a free speech activist, and you are, when somebody, in quotes, makes a joke, they would say, in their defence, Millard, about a pipe bomb, there's a bit of you that wants to say, oh, come on, it's gallows humour, it's a joke that's quite close to the edge.
Yeah.
You see the other side of that argument, don't you? That actually it's not a death threat, we should all just grow tougher hides.
Well, what I would say is the website that I alluded to earlier will show that there have been explicit death threats that would no way in court stand up as a joke. The other thing to remember, of course, is that every kid in the playground is fully aware that what bullies do is they attack you and they say, I was only joking. You know, this is the most common form of defence. I absolutely agree that there could be some jokes that are very near the knuckle and very near the edge, but you can recognise them when you see them. When there are explicit threats or explicit acts of libel, you can't then say afterwards, oh, it was just a joke, because that's not any kind of defence at all. And actually, you know, as a free speech advocate, I do believe that libel...
Advocate's a better word than activist.
Yeah, I'm not an activist. but I think libel laws, or well, not laws, but people taking libel suits is actually necessary to stand up against these bullies, which is what they are.
Just one broad reflection. I mean, you know, you're deep into this, that goes without saying, you've written a terrific book about it, but lots of people don't follow this, every, you know, scintilla of this story. In all this, it's worth bearing in mind that J.K. Rowling is not Mary Whitehouse. Yeah. I mean, you know, the gender-critical views you were talking about are, you know, pretty out there on the feminist wing of the discussion compared to where everyday opinion is, and yet she's still getting clobbered.
Well, actually, I mean, we can say what we want about gender-critical feminism, but the recognition of the biological reality of womanhood is actually a mainstream view. That's what the vast majority of people, including, may I say, the vast majority of trans people believe. So this idea that she's coming up with these fringe views, as I said, someone accusing her of being radicalised into... How can you be radicalised into a view that 99% of people in the country hold? What an odd perspective we're in. I mean, this has all the hallmarks of a witch hunt, if you think about it. You know, the bewildering disproportionality in terms of the response, the way it's all emerged so rapidly and with such intensity, the fact that everyone in the debate seems completely impervious to evidence, all of this stuff is witch hunt territory.
You've really hit your straps there.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.